Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and my fellow shareholders. As Chair, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the 2024 Annual General Meeting of Santos Limited. My name is Keith Spence, and it's a pleasure to welcome so many shareholders to our Adelaide Oval today. Apologies to you all for the late start. I understand there was some transport delays today, so we decided to defer the commencement of the meeting until everyone was able to attend. So thank you for your patience. I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on, the Kaurna people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I also wish to acknowledge the traditional owners and Indigenous peoples everywhere we operate and thank them for their involvement in our industry. Santos is committed to making a positive contribution to the communities that we operate in. I think the video you just saw highlights some of the exciting activities across our operations, in addition to some of the things we do to support the communities, be it through the Santos Foundation or direct investment in community initiatives. This is something that we're unashamedly proud of, and we continue to go about our business and make a positive contribution to the community. Before we commence the business of the meeting, please familiarise yourself with the evacuation procedures shown on the screens above. I also wish to advise that today's AGM is being recorded and that recording will be made available for viewing on our website after the meeting. I confirm that a quorum is present and I now formally declare the meeting open. Let me commence our business for today with some introductions. Fellow members of the Santos board here today include, from my far left, independent non-executive directors Eileen Doyle, Mushe Wera, Yasmin Allen, Peter Hurl and Vanessa Guthrie. And is seated immediately to my left, our Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Kevin Gallagher. Next to me on my right is Amelia Senek, our Company Secretary. And on Amelia's right is independent non-executive directors Mike Utzler, Guy Cowan and Janine McArdle. Also present and seated in the front row of the audience are John Lydon and Vicky McFadden, who the board have nominated for election as non-executive directors and will join the board from the conclusion of today's meeting if elected. A number of our executives are also present at today's AGM. On behalf of the board and our executive management team, we look forward to catching up with you, our shareholders, for some light refreshments once the formal meeting proceedings have concluded. Also present is Darren Lewson, representing our independent auditor, Ernst & Young. To allow everyone attending the meeting an opportunity to vote, I now open the polls for all resolutions set out in the notice of meeting. Shareholders and proxy holders can vote using their smartphone or iPad, following the instructions on the registration card provided by Computershare, which are also shown on the screens behind me. Please make yourself known to a Computershare representative if you have any need of assistance with casting your votes. I invite you to start submitting your votes on your device from this point onwards during the meeting. You can vote on the resolutions at any point during the meeting. You don't need to wait until the relevant item of business, and votes can be changed up until the time the polls are closed. To ensure that there's sufficient time for all votes to be cast, the polls will close 10 minutes after the conclusion of today's meeting. As advised in the notice of meeting, I will vote all available undirected proxies in favour of all resolutions. I'll display the proxy voting outcome for each item of business before moving to the next item. The formal results of the poll will be notified to the ASX after the meeting and will be posted on Santos's website. We've received lots of positive feedback from how last year's proceedings were run, particularly in relation to the Q&A session. We're sticking with this format because we think it enables me to answer as many questions from as many shareholders as time permits. To reacquaint yourself with the proceedings, we're asking shareholders to register their questions. You may have seen when you entered this morning that there's a question registration table. Many of you have already registered questions for these items of business today, and these will take precedence. For those who wish to ask a question today but are yet to register a question, please proceed to the question registration desk located directly outside the meeting room. The desk will remain open during the meeting, and we welcome you to register your questions at any time. If you have registered to ask a question at the appropriate item of business, you'll be called to ask your question, and you'll be directed to proceed to the microphone nearest to you, or if required, a microphone can be brought to you. Shareholders are asked to restrict themselves to one question at a time on each item of business. If time permits, you may return to the question registration desk for further questions on an item of business. However, we ask that you initially restrict yourself to one question to ensure that as many shareholders as possible have a chance to speak. One thing I will ask of you today, please keep your questions brief so that other shareholders have an opportunity to have their say. There may not be sufficient time available to address all the questions and comments raised, even if they have been registered. However, I'll provide a reasonable opportunity for shareholders as a whole to ask questions on each item. Further questions or comments from the floor may also be considered at the end of the meeting if time permits. If you require more information about the question registration process, please grab the attention of one of the many Santos staff members present, and they'll be able to assist you. So I'll commence our business today with my report to you, covering the results of 2023 and our priorities for 2024. Please note that the values referred to are in US dollars, unless otherwise stated. On behalf of the board, I'd like to acknowledge the work and the commitment of everyone at Santos throughout 2023. The year was very successful for Santos. Our Managing Director and CEO, Kevin Gallagher, and his team have continued the momentum of previous years by generating strong cash flows, progressing our major projects, and decarbonising our business. Santos continues to drive shareholder value through our disciplined operating model and capital management framework. While Kevin will go into this year's operation and financial performance in more detail in his address, I'm pleased to report the business was again strongly cash generative in 2023, with free cash flow of just over $2.1 billion. We strengthened our balance sheet, reducing gearing to 18.4%, excluding operating leases. We maintained our commitment to return at least 40% of free cash flow from operations to our shareholders. As a result, I'm pleased to report the company delivered $852 million in cash returns to shareholders. The board declared a final dividend of 17.5 cents per share unfranked, bringing total dividends declared for the year to 26.2 cents per share. Our strategic focus remains on the development of projects that backfill and sustain our existing infrastructure to deliver the critical fuels to meet customer demand, decarbonising our business, and providing carbon management services to customers and third parties, and developing low-carbon fuels as customer demand evolves over time. This means we'll continue to develop our Barossa gas project, our Pikka oil project in Alaska, and the resource base around our existing LNG projects in Gladstone, Darwin, and Papua New Guinea. Our LNG projects are supported by long-term contracts with quality customers in Asia, strong oil and JKM-linked pricing, and proximal carbon abatement opportunities. We'll also look for third-party carbon sources to support our future expansion of the Moomba carbon capture and storage project, and we'll continue to pursue our proposed Bayu-Undan carbon capture and storage project in Timor-Leste. As we execute our strategy, we'll continue to focus on value accretion and delivering sustainable returns to shareholders over the longer term. In addition to our financial metrics, we're also continuing to focus on environmental, social and governance metrics. This year, we committed to 2 new climate initiatives in our Sustainability and Climate Report. The first, aiming for zero methane emissions, is sponsored by the CEO-led Global Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. It's focused on accelerating action to a net zero future, consistent with the objectives of the Paris Agreement. Santos also joined the World Bank's Zero Routine Flaring by 2030 initiative, committing the company to work towards eliminating routine flaring from oil operations by 2030. People and culture are an important focus for Santos. At the start of 2023, we piloted a compressed 9-day fortnight across our Australian office locations under the banner of Flex Friday. The trial was successful, maintaining workforce productivity, and Flex Friday is now a permanent offering for our Australian workforce. The pilot programs in other locations are being planned. These initiatives add to other existing flexible work policies and practices across the company. In 2023, we increased female new hires by more than 50% on the level in 2020, and we nearly doubled female representation in the field workforce over the same period. We'll continue to implement initiatives to increase female representation in our workforce in skilled, secured, well-paid roles. 81 women and 68 men accessed our primary carers' 18 weeks of paid parental leave and received almost $1 million in childcare benefits from the company last year. These industry-leading programs are aimed at attracting and retaining people that we need to successfully deliver our Vision 2040 and implement our strategy. On Tuesday night, Santos held its 20th annual Environmental Health, Safety and Sustainability Awards ceremony. Sorry, quick trip here. These awards demonstrated the innovation of Santos's people in delivering safer, more environmentally sustainable and more efficient operations. Also on display were a wide range of health, education and other community programs and projects supported by Santos and the Santos Foundation across our global operations. These programs and projects are truly building a better future for the communities where we operate. A highlight for the board in 2023 was a visit to our Alaskan operations following the milestone spudding of the first Picker well last June. Santos is a prominent corporate citizen here in Australia, in South Australia and in other places around the country, and in Papua New Guinea. So it was pleasing to see that we're building the same prominent position in Anchorage and on the North Slope, including establishing long-term positive partnerships with local communities and stakeholders. The board was able to get out into the field, to visit the well pad on the North Slope, see the drilling rig in action and talk with the local workforce. In Anchorage, we held meetings with government representatives, Indigenous leaders and many other people and organisations who support our project and operations in one way or another. Our Alaskan project is truly exciting for the company. The Picker unit is one of the largest conventional oil discoveries made in the US in the last 30 years, and the Picker Phase 1 project is a significant development, one of the most significant developments on the North Slope in the last 20 years. At the end of March, we drilled 7 wells and completed flowbacks on 3 with favourable results to prognosis. Drilling pipeline installation, seawater treatment plant and the Nangchuk production facility activities are also progressing well, with the project on budget and on schedule for first production in 2026. The project's now 47% complete. Picker is a low emission intensity project in the top quartile of oil and gas development projects globally for greenhouse emissions. Our equity share of Scope 1 and 2 emissions will be net zero from day one of production. The board also visited Moomba in 2023 and saw the progress on our first carbon capture and storage project, which will be ready for first injection of CO2 within just a few months. Moomba CCS Phase 1 will be one of the lowest cost CCS projects in the world and will store up to 1.7 million tonnes of CO2 per year, depending on the CO2 availability. This is equivalent to around 28% of the total annual emissions reduction from Australia's electricity sector last year, making Moomba CCS very significant in Australia's journey to net zero emissions. With strong interest in abated natural gas domestically and internationally, Moomba CCS is well positioned to provide carbon management services to third parties in the future. While Kevin will have more to say about Barossa in his address, I'm pleased to report that we're currently drilling the second of 6 wells. Pipe laying is nearing completion. Subsea facilities and installation is well underway, and 13 of the 16 topside modules have now been installed on the floating production storage and offtake vessel. This makes the project more than 70% complete and on track for first production in the third quarter of 2025. We've enhanced our project consultation processes with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and communities over the past year, and we've sought to build stronger, deeper, broader, more meaningful relationships. I want to thank the many Tiwi and Larrakia and other Aboriginal communities across the top end who've worked constructively with us through this process. We continue to work with you and ensure that your communities share in the benefits of Barossa and the Darwin LNG project across the life of the projects. With Barossa and Moomba CCS, all scheduled to come online in the next 18 months, and Pikka in the first half of 2026. The company is in its peak capex year this year, with a strong line of sight to strong production, emissions reduction, and cash generation that will result from these major projects. These projects will transform Santos and provide long-term shareholder value. Our critical fuels are a necessary component of the energy security of Australia and Asia, and will be required to provide affordable, reliable energy whilst the world transitions to lower carbon alternatives. As we celebrate our company's 70th year, I want to thank my fellow board members for their commitment to Santos, and you, our loyal shareholders, for your ongoing confidence and belief in the company. In particular, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to our departing board members, Peter Hurl and Dr. Eileen Doyle. Both joined us in 2016, Eileen through our oil search heritage. Peter and Eileen have made very valuable contributions to Santos and have represented shareholders' interests with distinction and integrity during their tenure. Peter joined the board at a challenging time for Santos, when the company was at its lowest ebb. He's been an integral part of Santos' transformation over the last 8 years to become the stable, reliable business that it is today. Peter's chaired our EHSS committee since 2018, marking a continual improvement in our safety processes and environmental performance, and importantly, setting Santos' framework for the energy transition and our path to decarbonisation. At Oil Search, Eileen chaired the Sustainability Committee and oversaw the formation of the Oil Search Foundation, which is now the Santos Foundation. This is an incredible legacy. You would have seen some of the excellent initiatives and programs led by the Foundation in our opening video. We can all be very proud of the health, the youth, domestic violence, education and community development programs it runs in PNG to build and improve lives and a better future. It's been so successful that the work of the Foundation is being expanded to also cover our operations in Australia, Timor-Leste and Alaska. Peter and Eileen's guidance, expertise and character has been invaluable for our company, and we wish them both well in their endeavours, whatever they choose that to be. Finally, I thank all Santos' employees for their contribution and commitment to our company, and for their strong ongoing support to deliver Vision 2040. I'm very excited about our future, and I hope you are too. I'll hand over to Kevin now. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. I hope you all enjoyed our video at the commencement of proceedings today. This shows how far we have come in the past 8 years as we continue to supply the critical fuels that the world demands, and as we prepare to decarbonise through technologies such as carbon capture and storage and nature-based carbon sequestration. Our Moomba CCS, Barossa Gas and Pikka Oil projects are well underway, and they will be transformative for our company as they start up in 2024, 2025 and 2026 respectively. All these projects will put Santos in a strong position to deliver long-term value for our shareholders. And I am very proud of the strong relationships that we continue to build and maintain with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in our Australian operations and with the Indigenous communities everywhere we operate across Alaska, PNG and Timor-Leste. Turning first to our results. In 2023, we delivered record cash returns as a result of our high-performance culture, disciplined low-cost operating model and a strong focus on safety. Production was 92.2 million barrels of oil equivalent before adjustments for our production sharing contract for Bayu-Undan. Our sales revenue was nearly $5.9 billion. EBITDAX was nearly $4.1 billion, and our underlying profit was just over $1.4 billion. I've always said cash is king, and I am pleased to report that we delivered free cash flow from our operations of more than $2.1 billion for the year. Our results demonstrate strong operational performance and the capability of Santos to generate strong cash flows, develop major projects, and deliver sustainable shareholder returns. 8 years ago, we implemented our disciplined, low-cost operating model and set a free cash flow break-even oil price target of $35 per barrel for each asset and for our operating business overall. Pleasingly, our overall free cash flow break-even oil price in 2023 was less than $28 per barrel unhedged. And over the last 8 years, our discipline has turned negative cash flow into free cash flow of more than $2 billion this year and a total of about $11 billion overall. That's about 5 times the company's entire market cap in early 2016. Returned over $3 billion to shareholders, more than our entire market cap in 2016. We have upgraded our portfolio with 3 major transactions, which gave us operatorship and scale in Western Australia, the Northern Territory and Timor-Leste, and an increased interest in the world-class PNG LNG project. Decreased our unit production costs from $8.45 per barrel to $7.61 per barrel, excluding Bayu-Undan, through innovation, operational excellence, and delivering the synergies from our major transactions. Deleveraged the company from gearing of over 40% down to just over 18%, excluding operating leases, and improved our safety performance and established hydrocarbon release incident rates that are better than industry benchmarks. Importantly, we have led the industry in embracing decarbonisation through large-scale, low-cost carbon capture and storage, with our Moomba CCS project only months away from startup. And we're developing 2 world-class projects, Barossa and Pikka, that will set the company up with long-term, stable cash flows for the next 10 to 15 years at least. As a result, our market cap today is around 5 times our market cap at the beginning of 2016. Our diversified portfolio and disciplined low-cost operating model are designed to deliver free cash flow through the commodity price cycle. When Barossa and Pikka projects come online, we expect our unit production costs to further decline by about another 7%. Our portfolio positions Santos well to meet customer demand on our doorstep in Asia, where energy security, economic growth, and decarbonisation priorities will need to be carefully balanced over the next 2 decades. The Santos portfolio includes 3 world-class LNG assets with a quality LNG customer base and a strong contracted pricing with a volume-weighted average slope of more than 14% of the Japan custom crude marker. In part, this reflects the high heating value of a large proportion of our LNG production, which is particularly sought after in Japan and Korea. Our assets are strongly advantaged by proximity to Asian markets, and the majority of the portfolio is contracted, with flexibility to increase contracted volumes as market opportunities arise. Importantly, our base business, dominated by quality LNG projects in Gladstone, Darwin, and Papua New Guinea, remains strong. In Eastern Australia, gas from the Cooper Basin and Queensland coal seam gas fields supply our Gladstone LNG project. We drilled 108 wells and connected 96 new wells across our Cooper Basin fields in 2023. While this basin has been going strong for more than half a century, we are seeing very encouraging results for future production from a new play known as the Granite Wash. The Granite Wash is a resource within the Patchawarra Formation of the Permian Cooper Basin, located beneath the historical reservoirs in the Moomba field. It's close to existing gas processing and transport infrastructure, reducing potential development and production costs. And in our Queensland CSG fields, which also supply the Gladstone LNG project, we achieved a record new well connection count, bringing 455 wells online in 2023. In the north, Bayu-Undan and Darwin LNG have been a real success story, with production from Bayu extended through the innovation of our operations teams. We shipped additional spot cargoes from Darwin LNG in 2023, with the final cargo leaving last November. Domestic gas supply to the Northern Territory continues today, and it is a real credit to our people in Darwin to have been able to safely and reliably run the LNG plant at low production rates for so long. The Darwin LNG plant life extension work is now well underway, ahead of first gas from Barossa next year. The Barossa gas project itself is more than 70% complete and will backfill Darwin LNG for 15 to 20 years. The first Barossa well has been completed, and pleasingly, initial well flow rates are in line with expectations, with CO2 content at the low end of the expected range. At full production rates, Barossa is expected to add 1.8 million tonnes per annum to Santos' expanding LNG portfolio. Barossa is a world-class LNG asset designed to utilise existing infrastructure at Darwin LNG to deliver a low-cost, reliable, long-term source of supply to Japan and Korea. It has been very rewarding to get Barossa back on track this year and to build relationships with local communities. We have 7 Tiwi Islanders and Larrakia people working on the Barossa drilling rig, and 5 Tiwi Islanders employed as cultural observers and monitors for the pipelay activities. One of the highlights of 2023 for me was establishing a multi-million-dollar Aboriginal training and jobs pathway program with our contractor KAFR in the Northern Territory. The program kicked off with an initial intake of 12 scaffolding cadets earlier this year, and the interest in the program has been overwhelming. 26 positions are anticipated to be offered over the 4 years of the program. I am very proud of this program because training, education, and good jobs are the building blocks for individual, social, and economic empowerment, and just as importantly, for stronger, more resilient families and communities. You may also have seen our announcement this year to establish the Barossa Aboriginal Future Fund. The fund will receive income from the Barossa gas project revenues over the life of the project. Its purpose is to deliver community and homeland infrastructure, support cultural activities, and provide services to improve health, education, housing, community resilience, and economic outcomes for Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory. This is how Santos is living its own purpose and values through building a better future for communities where we operate, as we provide reliable and affordable energy to help create a better world for everyone. Barossa will be transformative, not only for our company, but for the Northern Territory. Just as Bayu-Undan has been transformative for Timor-Leste, contributing approximately $25 billion to the country's economy over the last 20 years and employing hundreds of Timorese people in skilled, well-paying jobs. Barossa will also be net zero reservoir emissions from day one of production. Santos continues to pursue its Bayu-Undan carbon capture and storage project, which would safely and permanently store up to 10 million tonnes of CO2 per year, including CO2 from our Barossa gas project. Santos and our joint venture partners have already invested nearly $40 million on front-end engineering and design for this project, and over $310 million to establish the infrastructure to enable storage of CO2 from Barossa at the Bayu-Undan CCS project in the future. And we are working with both the Timor-Leste and Australian governments as they implement enabling regulatory frameworks for cross-border transfer of CO2 and safe operations for storage. Our world-class PNG LNG project also performed well, maintaining gross production volumes of 8.4 million tonnes, while production costs reduced by $26 million in 2023. Our Pikka project in Alaska is a Tier 1 project that is progressing towards first production in 2026, with well flowback results favourable to our expectations. The project has strong economics, is located in a world-class oil-producing province with significant existing infrastructure, low emissions intensity, and support from the Alaskan government, Indigenous, and local communities. It also provides an opportunity for Santos to further diversify its portfolio to include oil production outside key LNG operations in Australia and PNG. Our Santos Energy Solutions business is focused on decarbonising our operations and providing carbon management services to our customers and other third parties, particularly in hard-to-abate sectors such as steel. Our view is that decarbonising natural gas will support long-term supply of the reliable, affordable energy that continues to be demanded by our customers into the future. We see carbon capture and storage as vital in achieving decarbonisation at scale, and Santos has a strong competitive advantage with carbon storage resources close to our gas production, processing, and transport infrastructure. International Energy Agency and Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change scenarios also assume a critical role for carbon capture and storage and direct air capture technologies if the world is to meet its climate goals. The European Union and many of its members, the United States and our neighbours in Indonesia and Malaysia, are accelerating these technologies to drive the energy transition at scale. The IEA has recognised Australia as having a competitive advantage in CCS, saying in 2023 that Australia is well suited to large-scale deployment of CCS to facilitate domestic CO2 abatement and support regional emissions reductions. However, Australia is lagging the rest of the world in providing the policy and regulatory settings and the market signals that would facilitate greater private investment in what could be a new, profitable, job-creating energy transition industry for our nation. In closing, I am confident we have the right strategy, organisation and people to prosper through the energy transition, backfilling and sustaining our existing infrastructure to supply the critical fuels our customers continue to demand, decarbonising our operations, and developing low-carbon fuels as markets evolve. The whole Santos team will continue to focus on disciplined growth, implementing our low-cost operating model, driving costs down and delivering value for our shareholders. How we do this matters, and before you leave today, I encourage you to pick up a copy of our Sustainability and Climate Report at the back of the room and learn more about the incredible community development work our company and the Santos Foundation are doing to build a better future everywhere we operate. I will now hand back to Keith. Thank you.
So thank you, Kevin. Ladies and gentlemen, we now move to the formal business of the meeting. The notice of meeting has been distributed to shareholders and I will take that as read. I'll address each of the agenda items in turn and proxy voting outcomes for these items will be shown on the screens behind me. Shareholders will be provided with an opportunity to ask questions and to make comments in relation to each item or groups of items. As mentioned earlier, I ask that you please register your questions at the question registration booth outside the meeting room in the foyer. I'll call for registered questions when we get to the relevant item of business and you'll be called to the microphone to speak. All questions should be addressed to me as the Chair in the first instance. After I address each item of business, James Murphy, who joins us in the room, will call forward shareholders one by one to please move to the nearest microphone in the room to ask their registered question. Once you've asked your question, please return to your seat. I note that we've received a number of questions from shareholders prior to the meeting, a majority of which have been addressed in my or Kevin's earlier comments. However, there's a couple I'll respond to before we start the formal questions from the floor. James, can you please read out these pre-submitted questions?
Chair, what is your response to the ACCR suggestion that a share buyback would have a better outcome for shareholders?
Thanks, James. Look, we have a very robust strategy and a very strategically diverse portfolio of assets that delivered record shareholder returns in 2023. We have a disciplined investment process in which we rigorously assess options to drive the best return for shareholders. This assessment weighs up investing in our high-quality portfolio against issuing dividends or executing share buybacks.
Chair, the next question. What are the company's short to medium-term plans to divest oil and gas assets in favour of renewable energy?
I think we've just covered our strategy, which is to backfill and sustain, decarbonise our product, and then build a low-carbon fuels business. We continue to invest in products that deliver on the needs of our customers in both Australia and abroad. Given the strong demand for natural gas in the global energy mix until 2050 and beyond, we continue to invest in projects that will drive the dual ambitions of ensuring energy security while lowering emissions. Thank you.
Chair, do you have a dividend reinvestment policy?
Santos has a dividend reinvestment plan. However, this is not currently active, as we're not seeking to issue more equity. Our capital management policy, though, is to return 40% of free cash flow from operations to shareholders via cash dividends and buybacks. We'll now move to the first item of business, and that's to receive and consider the financial report, the director's report, and the auditor's report for the year ended 31st of December 2023. I now lay before the meeting the financial report, the director's report, and the auditor's report for the financial year ended 31st of December 23. I note there's no formal resolution for this item of business. Rather, this provides shareholders with an opportunity to ask questions about the reports, the management of the Santos Group and its operations. Shareholders may also ask questions of the auditor relevant to the conduct of the audit, the preparation of the content of the auditor's report, the accounting policies adopted in preparing the financial statements, and the auditor's independence. James, do we have any questions registered from shareholders on this item?
Chair, the first question is from James Hahn, representing the Australian Shareholders Association.
Mr Chairman,
Thank you, James.
as has been said, James Hahn from the Australian Shareholders Association. We've analysed Santos's financial reports and we're fine with the performance under the circumstances. So as a consequence of that and other analysis, we will be voting for all resolutions. There's one brief question attached to that. Is your timeline for your projects the same as it was this time last year, or have there been alterations?
Yeah, sorry, the project, are you referring to the Barossa project?
All of your projects,
Oh, all the
Barossa,
projects.
Pika. Has there been a shift in timeline from the plan that you had 12 months ago?
The Pika project is perfectly on track, as Kevin mentioned in his presentation. The Barossa project, despite the challenges, I think we've maintained a schedule pretty well in line with the original schedule. That's correct? Yeah. Thanks, James.
Chair, the next question is from John Glenn.
Chairman, at present time, Santos is paying unfranked dividends.
Yeah.
When does the company expect to pay company tax so that it can frank dividends in the future?
I can't give you a precise year because it's dependent on things like oil price, timing of project delivery and all those sort of things. But I think you can expect that within several years we'll be in a position to be paying franked shares again.
This mainly due to accumulated tax losses?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. James, next question.
Chair, the next question is from Robert Cooper.
Thank you, Chairman. It follows on from the franking credits.
Sorry.
Robert Cooper. I've often asked questions about franking credits before. We shareholders rely on them. It's our money, not yours. So do you have surplus franking credits? And you obviously are paying some tax in Australia, so I would have thought that we would have got a percentage of franking credits this year. I do appreciate the fact that you actually returned to paying dividends, and I'm sure all shareholders appreciate that. So thank you, Kevin, for your Scottish approach to shareholders. But I'm just concerned, as a fairly large shareholder, that we also like the franking credits as well. So can you at least give us an idea of the surplus that you carry at the moment and how we as shareholders can benefit from that? Thank you.
So, Rob, the surplus that we have on the balance sheet today is very, very small, almost minuscule. And so right now, as the previous question alluded to, we're eating up previous tax losses. So the quicker we can get through them, the quicker we can get to returning to frank dividends. I too look forward to that day because I hate paying that tax on those dividends as well. I'm in the same boat as you when it comes to that. So we're very keen to get there as quickly as we can. I think we really, as soon as you'll see us eat through those losses very quickly the minute Barossa comes online and we start generating very significant cash flows from that project. Thank you.
Thank you. James, next question.
Chair, the next question is from Manjik Gill.
My question is a very simple one. I have shares in my super fund as well as in my wife and I own. Question two. I note all these wonderful speeches you guys have given. The question is, what's holding back Santos' share price? Is it the management or is it the board? You seem to be trading water between $7 and $7.50, $7.60 for the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Look, I'll address that in a couple of ways. I think the first thing is we think the business is performing extremely well. It's generating significant free cash flow under a disciplined operating model. And we're making the company stronger year on year on year. In 2023, we returned a record $852 million to shareholders in cash through dividends. And the final dividend for 23, as you're aware, was 17.5 cents. So we're in a process of optimising the portfolio through inorganic and organic growth opportunities. And as Kevin's indicated, with those projects imminent, Barossa and the Picker project and the cash flows generated from those projects, we see a very exciting future ahead for our shareholders. We're in a phase at the moment of significant capital investment, and as I said in my speech earlier, this is our peak year for capital. And next year, that number goes down, and the year after, we'll be benefiting from all that production from Barossa and the Picker project. Just to sort of come back, I'd say with Santos, our strategy is not one about maximising short-term shareholder returns. Our strategy is one about delivering sustained growth. And if you take a look at Santos, say since 2018, which is when I joined the board, in fact, no, we'll go back even further, back to 2016 when Kevin joined the board, we've delivered a really attractive total shareholder return over that period of time, outperforming the index of energy peers on the ASX. The market cap of the company, I think, has increased almost 5 times, Kevin, in that time. So we're not driven by necessarily short-term thinking on this. We've actually got a long-term plan here that will deliver more value for shareholders. We're very confident about that. I hope that addresses your question. Thank you. Next question, James.
Chair, the next question is from David Cox.
Thank you, Keith. In 2023, there were just 12 dedicated geological storage CCS facilities globally. These facilities have nameplate capacity totalling 11.3 million tonnes per year. This minuscule global nameplate capacity reflects the challenges associated with geological storage CCS facilities. Chevron's Gorgon facility is the largest project of this type, with a capacity of 4 million tonnes of CO2 injection per year, but has experienced significant cost overruns and CO2 injection underperformance. Considering these cost overruns, CO2 injection underperformance and limited operational success of geological storage CCS projects, can Santos explain how it will deliver in Bayu-Undan 10 million tonnes per annum of CO2 injection at a significantly lower cost than Chevron? And related to that, what's the company's strategy if either Bayu-Undan is deemed uneconomical during FEED or it underperforms when it's operational? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. It does give me an opportunity to talk about CCS, something which I'm very passionate about and probably know more about the statistics. I'd point out that there are in excess of 40 projects that operate with carbon capture and storage around the world. The largest one is in Brazil, which stores 10.6 million tonnes per annum. These projects are operating today. And if you look that under the current IRA that operates in the US, that's stimulated 50% of the future sort of growth in CCS projects. So there's about, I think it's just under 150 projects in construction or in advanced development at the moment across the world, and 50% of those are in the US. So this is not a new technology. It's something that's been around for quite some time. You talk about Gorgon and compare us to that. Gorgon is a greenfield development. It uses a reservoir that hasn't been developed before. It doesn't have the benefits that we have of infrastructure that's pre-existing. So the reason that Moomba and our projects such as Bayu-Undan are so attractive is that we're able to use and repurpose existing infrastructure, mitigating the investment that we'd require in a greenfield reservoir. And when we come to reservoir performance, I'd also point out that our reservoirs that we're injecting into at Moomba, for instance, where we will be injecting into Moomba, are reservoirs that have been produced for the last 40 years. We know the integrity of those reservoirs. They've held CO2, which is in the reservoir gas, for 80 million years. And of course, we've got the benefit of all this production history and knowledge we've had over those 40 years that help. But we know we can inject. We know that we can control where these molecules are being stored. Gorgon knew none of that. It was a totally greenfield development with no production history. So there are many things that mean that we can approach our CCS investments with much, much greater confidence. I hope that addresses your question. Thank you.
Just a clarification, you quoted a very large number of CCS projects.
Yeah.
Were they all geological storage facilities?
Oh, a mixture, but I would also point out that some of the CCUS projects, which is what you're also referring to, actually sequester CO2 over the life of those projects. Because when you inject CO2 into the ground, not all of it comes back. Some of it sticks and stays. And over the life of a field, those CCUS projects store CO2 as well. So cumulatively at the moment, I think of the existing operations, it's around 50 million tonnes per annum that are being stored. To give you some indication of what we're aiming for, we need about a 240 times increase in CO2 CCS storage capacity to meet the objectives of 2050, or the contribution that's required from CCS. I think the thing that's also interesting with CCS is it's a technology that can address emissions at a large scale. And I don't know whether you've noticed, but every year as the world's progress to decarbonise gets slower, the bar is raising for the contribution of CCS. It has a very significant role to play in the future. And that's why we're pursuing that strategy. Thank you. Next question, James.
Chair, the next question is from Lena Sudano.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
My question concerns another kind of risk. The olive ridley turtles that are impacted in the north of Australia are listed under the Endangered Species Act. Construction of the Barossa pipeline will harm the turtles' feeding habitat and create noise and light pollution. What specific actions is Santos taking to mitigate this risk?
Look, I don't think I can go into the detail of the specific actions. What I can tell you is we've been through a process. Part of our whole environmental approval process is to consider issues such as that. These processes look at fauna, they look at flora, they look at all sorts of possibilities, and then the regulators, as a result of that, put conditions on us for things like, you talked about light, for example. That's always one of the considerations that goes into the design of facilities. I think probably the best thing to do there would be, we'll take your question on notice and we can post a more detailed response that would satisfy you on our website, if that's okay.
That would be helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Unless there's anything you want to add there?
No, really just, we do very detailed environmental studies, and the regulator obviously reviews those before it gives us the approval to go forward with our activities.
Yeah. Next question, please, James.
Chair, the next question is from Mark Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. I'd like to ask about three things about the Narrabri gas project.
Mm-hmm.
The landholder opposition, the time delays, and the market shrinkage. The Queensland Hunter Gas Pipeline is proposed to deliver the Narrabri gas project coal seam gas to the New South Wales domestic market. However, the Hunter Gas Landholder Rights Alliance has 120 members, and 60% of the land holdings between Musselbrook and Miller's Forest have indicated they do not want the pipeline on their land. There are also time delays and a likely market shrinkage. The Narrabri gas project was approved for production in 2020. However, the latest Santos year-end report notes the final investment decision is not now due until 2025. Furthermore, Santos must go back and negotiate again with the Gomeroi. The EIS for the Narrabri lateral pipeline is pushed back to late 2024, and as I mentioned, there continues to be consistent and widespread landholder opposition to the Hunter gas pipeline. So delays and more delays. Meanwhile, the Port Kembla gas import terminal plans to be online and importing gas by mid-2025. Gas will be imported earlier than Santos has even decided to invest in the project. My question, Mr. Chairman, is, do you believe that this combination of landholder opposition, multiple delays, and the upcoming gas import terminal are together a fundamental risk to the Narrabri gas project? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Let's turn first to the sort of stakeholder, landholder sort of issue. We've been an operator in onshore Australia now for 65 years. We've partnered with landholders and local communities to develop our resources across the country in a very safe and we've worked very sustainably with our landholders. And I think we've got a proven and proud track record of coexistence, and we recognise the importance of working respectfully with our landholders who host our infrastructure. So we're going through that kind of process at the moment. We have, across the country, 3,950 agreements with landholders and landowners. So there's a track record. We're working through those processes now. And you know, with any of these things, there are people who support and there are people who oppose. And the job here is to sort of work with those people and develop an understanding and a mutual way forward. It takes time. But I would say that your point about the shrinking market is one that I'd contest quite strongly. The energy regulator has reduced, the East Coast Energy Regulator has released some scenarios recently, and in every scenario, demand for gas on the east coast of Australia is increasing. It's not a market, in my view, which is sort of shrinking. So we're pursuing the Narrabri opportunity. We're not investing large amounts of shareholder activities in field operations. We're progressing with approvals to get to a point of comfort to go to the next step. We're not at that point yet. Kevin, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I think they're all good points that you raised. And the reality is that if we got to the point we're ready to take FID and the market conditions were such that didn't support the investment in the project, you wouldn't take a final investment decision on the project at that point in time. Typically, we would have a lot of gas contracted before we would make that decision, and therefore our economics would be locked in for the project. On the Narrabri gas project versus the import terminal, that's one I do want to comment on, though, and I can't help myself, so I apologise if this gets me in trouble. But if Australia goes down the path of importing gas for the East Coast versus Narrabri gas, then that'll be a very sad day for the East Coast domestic markets, because you'll be paying a lot more for your gas than you would be if you were buying Narrabri gas. And so I think the competitive advantage Narrabri would have over any imported gas is that it would be significantly lower cost for the customers. And that would be at a price that still obviously has to meet our investment hurdles. So I'm not worried so much about a terminal as a competitor, because I know what the reason we export gas into international markets is because higher price markets, right? And so ultimately, if you're buying off those markets to bring it into New South Wales, you're buying more expensive gas to import to New South Wales market. So I think the market will be there, number one, but in terms of competition, I welcome all competition. I think it keeps us sharp. I think it keeps the energy prices as low as they can be. But we would not invest in something that didn't make sense if it didn't screen against our hurdles. But I wouldn't be afraid of that competition. Narrabri is a low cost. If it ever goes ahead, it will be a low cost and very lucrative project. Thank you.
Next question, James.
Chair, the next question comes from Sydney Chatfield.
Mr. Chair, the creation of the Pilliga Forest in Delby marked upon the Gomeroi Nation's psyche and being. It's the lungs of the Gomeroi lands and sky. Any interruptions or any actions by Santos is an affront to the Gomeroi Nation and Australia as a whole. will Santos take any steps to stop the destruction of our country for your gas expansion plan? Can you return your capital to your shareholders instead of destroying our country? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'd point out that we are consulting and we are working with the Gomeroi people. We have since 2012. And this has been a long process. We've been in formal negotiations around the Narrabri gas project since 2015. The recent decision by the Federal Court, which allowed an appeal against the determination by the Native Tribunal, we accept. Fortunately, though, for us, the findings were clear. Santos has acted in good faith in its negotiations, and we will continue to act in good faith in those negotiations. We'll continue to engage constructively with the Gomeroi people and work closely with them to ensure that the heritage is protected and that you will benefit from the gas project development. So there's a discussion that's underway, and we'll continue that discussion with you. It's one where we need, both parties need to be in a place where we can proceed. Thank you. Yep. James?
Chair, the next question is from Dorothy Tai.
Everybody, hello.
Hey.
I'd like to pay my respects today that I'm standing on unceded land from the Kaurna people. My question is in regards to the Pilliga Forest. Pilliga Forest is one of the remaining places where our sovereignty rights and our interests are still able to be freely exercised. In an environment that has remained relatively physically unchanged since colonialism. Why isn't Santos considering our sovereign rights and need to protect country in your gas expansion plans?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for your acknowledgement of the Kaurna people. I think I've kind of covered that with the last question. I mean, we're genuine in our engagement with the Gomeroi people. We respect cultural heritage, and we're working with you to try and find a way forward to be able to enable the Narrabri project. That's our intention, and we'll continue to do that in good faith. But so I don't think people can sort of hear you, but I think I heard what you were saying, and let me sort of respond to that. The whole point of the consultation and working with you is to understand those issues and try and find a way forward that can meet your needs as well as the needs of the country in Santos. So. I can't, sorry, can you take your seat, please? Sorry, I couldn't hear that. But if you stay around maybe to the end, maybe we could have a discussion. That'd be good. Thank you. All right, next question, James.
Chair, the next question is from Raymond Weatherall.
Raymond.
Obviously, I want to acknowledge the Kaurna people whose land we're on today.
Yeah.
Yamangita Gamilare Gulda, Lady Gulda, Birja Guru, Cabin Gurugo, Gamilare, here by Cubby Cumbo. I was there for those good faith discussions. I was an applicant from 2016 to 2023. I sat through the whole trial with the National Native Title Tribunal. There was total disdain for our culture and heritage, and I'm sure that the lawyer who represented Santos conveyed the messages that you gave him. He talked about the determination, how we as Gomeroi people, you wouldn't be negotiating with us as people if you didn't recognise the Gomeroi people were there before colonisation. That's why that process is there. I do want to ask though about the zero emissions that you always talk about. Having 850 gas wells over the projected lifetime of it, with 850 gas wells pushing methane up into the atmosphere, how will you ever get to zero emissions?
So I think in my address I did mention that we've just recently signed up to a couple of initiatives around reducing methane. One is actually to get to net zero. The intention is to get to net zero emissions from oil and gas operations. We put a lot of effort into understanding our methane emissions in Santos, and they're actually quite low. They're down at around 0.18%, which is better than way better than kind of global average. So, but we've got more to do there, and we will. We have plans for how we'll attract those sort of things. So, that's a really kind of a technical issue that we're addressing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, James.
Chair, the next question is from Bryn O'Brien.
Thank you.
This one, thank you, Chair. The microphone's a little bit high for me, but Bryn O'Brien, I'm a shareholder in Santos. A shareholder in Santos, and also I represent the Australasian Centre for Corporate Responsibility. This is actually a question in relation to Resolution 2A, however, in relation to your re-election. Is it appropriate to ask that question now?
As long as it's appropriate for me to answer, yes.
Yes. So I'm from the board. Obviously, has a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders or to the company, and I'm trying to make sense of some of the comments that have been made today in relation to peak capex. Peak capex is something you've emphasised a couple of times. The CEO's conclusion in his comments outlined 4 components of the company's strategy. Growth was not one of them. Now, you'll be aware of the ACCR research, which models various scenarios for the company going forward, and the conclusion of our research is that the growth projects that the company is pursuing at the moment, which are anticipated to go to FID in the next couple of years, have only modest incremental value in total, and that a capital return strategy is more value accretive. So my question is this. Is a no-growth strategy, which is no growth in projects, no growth in emissions, much lower risk strategy, is that under consideration by the board?
So we have a very active process of examining our portfolio constantly, and the board, it's one of the jobs of a board is to look at what's the best option for shareholders, and we consider all alternatives, including the sorts of things that you've talked about. That's our responsibility.
Well, that's very well, we welcome that very much, very good to hear. Particularly in relation to the Papua LNG project, our research models a negative NPV for that project. At what point will a call be made on that project, and why would it still be pursued by the company?
That's a fairly really easy thing to answer. We wouldn't take an investment decision on a project that wasn't a good project. We have very well-defined investment criteria we use for our projects. That project's currently in FEED. It's going through a sort of a recycle at the moment because some of the cost estimates that came in, you've kind of read in the papers. So let's see where that one goes. This is normal business as part of a FEED project, and let me just reassure you that a project has to meet rigorous investment criteria to get up. You talked about our projects being fairly modest in value. Kevin made the point about our Barossa project. It's one of the most attractive LNG projects going.
Yes, and that project was included.
Okay. Sorry, James? Yeah.
If I could just add to the Chairman's answer, we have a portfolio of opportunities, and we would always review all of those against each other for the best use of capital. And so there's 2 tests we would do in any project. Number 1, it has to be economic, has to add value, or you wouldn't take a final investment decision. And typically, the ones at the top of the queue will go into front-end engineering on FEED, and at the end of that process, we'd make that decision, along with our joint venture partners. So there's 3 sets of eyes on those economics in Papua. There's ourselves, ExxonMobil and Total, and none of us would go forward with that project if it wasn't economic. But the other thing we also do is we compare each project against the other opportunities in our portfolio. So we have very significant optionality against our portfolio, and that's why they don't all go forward, and they will not all go forward at the same time, because that would eat up the cash flows, and then it would be less returns for shareholders during that period. So our focus is very much on ensuring we've got a balanced approach to that. And I can assure you, I'm very focused on ensuring that the only good projects will go forward and the best projects will go forward.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Next question, James.
Chair, the next question is from David Everett.
Chair, I'm a shareholder but also a paediatrician.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question about legal risk. Just need my glasses.
So do I.
At what point of increase in global temperature or parts per million of atmospheric CO2 does the Santos board face a likely risk of legal action, including huge class actions, for knowingly causing harm to human health by continued extraction of carbon-based fuel beyond accepted thresholds, with such legal action tipping the shareholder value to a major loss?
I think probably the important thing to stress there, you talk about beyond accepted thresholds, the planet is aiming for a target of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees C by 2050. As part of that, we've made commitments as a company to what we're going to be doing with our emissions. We've set targets. By 2040, we expect our Scope 1 and 2 emissions to be net zero. So our strategy is very much about decarbonising our products and contributing to that, getting the world to the right place. But I do share your concern about infant mortality, and I think you will see that there's a balance needs to be maintained here, because the places that we operate in, like Papua New Guinea and West and East Timor-Leste, if you look at infant mortality rates there, that's my concern, and the difference that we make through our investments that we're able to make today. From the revenues that come in from our projects, they are making a genuine difference to infant mortality rates in Papua New Guinea through the hospitals and facilities, the clinics, the programs that we offer through the All Sorts Foundation and in our own investments. So, there's a thing here about this transitioning, the energy transition and bringing emissions down, but doing that in a just way that some of these communities that are disadvantaged today are helped through this period, and that we can raise their standards of health at the same time. So there's a balance there. Thank you. James?
Chair, the next question is from Lily Hirsch.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I've got 2 very brief questions today. The first is, I'm just wondering how many Indigenous people are employed in senior management positions in Santos?
I can't tell you the exact number, but I can tell you, for instance, that in Papua New Guinea, something in excess of 90% of our workforce is Indigenous, First Nations people of Papua New Guinea. In Australia, we've increased our participation rates of Indigenous people in the company significantly. Kevin, do you have any statistics you could?
Well, what I can tell you is, and it'll be in our sustainability report, so we've increased Indigenous participation within Santos in terms of direct employment and indirect employment very considerably over the last year and a half to 2 years. And this year we're tracking very favourably against the targets we've set. In fact, we were on track to beat those targets. We'll continue to do that. We have nobody on the executive team, but we have senior managers in the company who are Indigenous leaders. And given we're a global organisation, now as Keith said, you know, our work in P&G since merging with Oil Search has been very rewarding. In fact, we've now got a national workforce of over 90%, which is the highest it's ever been, even during all of Oil Search's period. And we got the first very senior operational leader to be a national appointed late last year. So we're making great strides in all of those spaces, and we'll continue to focus on that.
Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind, I've just got that second brief question. Many banks and insurance companies around the world are pulling out of fossil fuel projects. What are your management strategies to mitigate these risks?
Look, I think a big part of that is about the company being robust, having a good portfolio and good revenues in the future that enable us to fund our business going forward, to be self-sustaining. Thank you. James, any more questions?
Chair, the next question is from Lena Sudano.
Thank you. Thank you for the advice to register for the second question. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
The Financial Times reported that K-Sure, the South Korean government export credit agency's insurance, expired on the 26th of January from the Barossa gas project. Is this impacting the project?
Do you want to make a comment there, Kevin?
No, I mean, the project itself doesn't have project financing, so I think that relates to one of the partners. That's their own specific coverage. Each partner funds its own share of the project, and there are no financing issues with the project at this point in time.
James?
Chair, the next question is from David Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This is just a follow-up to my previous question, which got lost in the atmosphere somewhere.
Sorry.
Can you elaborate on Santos' strategy if Bayou Undan is deemed uneconomical during the front-end engineering design process, or if it underperforms when it's operational? Thank you.
Well, I think one thing that I'm relatively confident about is the performance, because, as I said, we know the reservoirs, etc. But in my mind, that's a much lower risk. Look, we're going through a process at the moment of doing front-end engineering and design on that project, and it's not at a final investment decision yet. The rules around transfer of hydrocarbons, of CO2 across international borders, etc., ought to be. So there's still a way to sort of run on that. But we have obligations under Australian law that we have to meet under the safeguard mechanism, so we're preparing ourselves for that situation as well. We have a business in Santos now called Santos Energy Solutions. It's a division of the company. We're not just pursuing one strategy. We see the Santos Energy Solutions business as one that can grow services from other facilities such as Moomba, which could provide credits that would offset, for example, production from Bayou Undan. We're also pursuing our own nature-based projects and building a portfolio of nature-based projects that will provide us as a source of credits to offset. So we have various backup alternatives than just banking purely on one strategy. Kevin, do you want to add anything there?
I'm very confident it will be economic.
Yeah. We don't normally go into a phase without there's a gated process we go through as we make these decisions, and at each point in that process you assess it with the best economic data you have available. You make the decision to take the next step in investment. So we have an idea of where this thing will land. Thank you.
If I could just follow that up. You seem to be saying, Kevin, that you're confident it was economic. Chair,
That was the other part of the question. I'll just...
sure. Chair, you seem to be contemplating the fact that it might not be operational, but you had other options up your sleeve.
No, I wasn't contemplating that. I'm saying that the board is not so naive as to think that you don't need to have a plan B and a plan C for these things. So we carry alternatives.
Do you think
as
your
part of our
alternatives are
portfolio.
sufficient to compensate for the huge amount you're planning to put in that facility?
Well, if we take FID and proceed with the facility, we're confident that it will proceed. I don't quite understand your question. Well, I've told you that we have alternatives that we'd consider. Yeah.
Can I just make the point? The project is for capturing CO2 up to 10 million tonnes per annum. Barossa is nowhere near that. It's just over 2. And Barossa's emissions make up a small part of the Biowind and CCS overall plan. We look to bring other customers and other customers in providing third-party CO2.
I mean, the exciting thing about that project, as Kevin says, is that it's the number of customers that are now coming to us asking for solutions to their carbon emissions problems. And that's been a real shift, I think, over the last year. We're starting to see the potential for the commerciality of the Santos Energy Solutions businesses and the services that that can provide to others to help them mitigate their own emissions. Thank you. Next question.
Chair, the next questions on this item are for the auditors, and the first question is from Claire Astle.
Santos's current annual expenditure on decommission seems very low compared to the overall provisioned obligation. Have you assessed whether Santos is likely to meet the current regulatory obligations for decommissioning under Section 572 of the Offshore Petroleum and Greenhouse Gas Storage Act 2006?
Yeah, look, I'll ask Kevin to say a few words before we talk to the audit, because this is an item that the board reviews kind of very regularly, and there is a plan, and we're actually progressing with that plan, working with the regulator quite kind of closely on it. I think this year is something like $300 million in decommissioning costs, and we see a program of that over the next few years. But Kevin, you...
It's higher than that this year. It's around $350 million US dollars in decommissioning spend this year, and that's why our sustaining capex levels are up from the normal levels, because we include decommissioning spend in our sustaining capital numbers every year. We consider it a part of business as usual that we have to decommission. Every year we spend around $20 million in the Cooper Basin just decommissioning old wells and old pipelines as an ongoing part of our business as usual. And offshore this year we're conducting right now, today, several offshore campaigns removing old platforms, pipelines and decommissioning offshore wells. So for the next couple of years, decommissioning spend will be higher than it's been historically because we're taking a lot of those campaigns. And then I'd expect it to come back a little bit, but then there'll be a steady amount of decommissioning year on year as we eat up decommissioning activities, as we take that off the balance sheet, those liabilities off the balance sheet. The one thing I would say, though, is bear in mind we can't decommission it until it gets to the end of field life. And so as long as we can extend fields and find more economic ways of prolonging the production from facilities, that's what we would look to do. And in the case of some of our other assets, of course, repurposing infrastructure to use for other projects, such as CCS projects where applicable. Not all facilities can be, or infrastructure can be repurposed, but some can be. That obviously has advantages too. We do not move liabilities off the balance sheet for, say, CCS projects until we take FID on those projects. We keep them as decommissioning liabilities, and so that number probably looks a bit higher than we would intend it to be because we'll be repurposing some of that infrastructure. But yep, the spend is pretty high this year and next year.
So that's our short introductory remark, but you did ask the auditors, so I'll ask Darren to make a comment as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question, Ms. Astle. During the course of our audit, we we performed extensive procedures in relation to the company's preparation of the financial statements, specifically in relation to its obligations regarding restoration. And if you have a look at our independent audit report, we listed restoration obligations as a key audit matter, and in our report to the shareholders, we describe in some detail the extent of the focus on restoration obligations and our conclusions in that regard. So we're very comfortable that the financial statements have been prepared in accordance with the accounting standards, specifically in relation to restoration obligations.
Okay. Thank you. James?
Chair, the next question for the auditor is from Karen Joyce.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's right. This is a question for the auditor. There is increasing regulatory scrutiny in Australia of restoration decommissioning liability data and the financial reporting of these liabilities. What steps have you taken to ensure confidence that your assessment of Santos restoration obligations and the processes used to develop the reported provisions are robust enough to withstand increased regulatory scrutiny?
I'm not sure if this is on. There we go. Thank you, Ms. Joyce, for your question. At the risk of restating some of my previous response, I think the fact that we listed in our audit report as one of only two key audit matters that we thought was relevant to outline in detail in our report, I think that's evidence of the focus that we put on this area, and we're certainly very comfortable that the company has complied with the accounting standards, which of course require that those restoration obligations are appropriately measured, recorded and disclosed in the financial report. So we are very, very comfortable.
I'd also add that as part of their report to us every year, our auditors also advise us of trends, of legislative trends, where accounting standards, etc., are going, so that we're well prepared for those changes in advance. So we don't just, we're not just comfortable with the standards of today, we've actually got an eye to the future in this space, and they advise us in this space as well. Thank you. James?
Chair, there are no further questions on this item.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's move to the next item of business then. The next item of business, item 2, is the re-election of directors. As I'm seeking re-election, Mike Utzler will introduce Resolution 2A and take questions, and then I'll introduce the remaining resolutions on this item and take questions for the remaining director re-elections and elections together. I'll now hand over to Mike.
Good morning, and thank you, Keith. Keith was appointed to the board on the 1st of January in 2018 and became chair on February 19th of 2018. In his capacity, he's chair of Santos Finance Limited, and he's the chair of the Nominations Committee. Further biographical details on Keith and his history are contained in the notice of the meeting. You can see his depth and breadth of experiences. In accordance with the Constitution, Keith is retiring, but being eligible offers himself for re-election. The board strongly endorses, with Keith abstaining, of course, the recommendation that shareholders vote in favour of Keith's re-election. I'll now invite questions with regards to the relation to the re-election of Keith. James, do we have any questions from the shareholders with regards to this item?
Acting Chair, the first question is from Bronwyn Adcock.
Hi. My question relates to the strategic review the company first flagged back in November. In February, the annual earnings call, you said that you're working with advisors to explore options to unlock shareholder value. How's that process going, and when might there be an update on how this is proceeding?
Well, specifically, I can say one of the key responsibilities of the board in working with the management and organization is on ensuring that we assess the value of our portfolio against our strategy, and to develop confidence that we have the best strategy in place to deliver the best returns to our shareholders. With regards to those strategic reviews, let me simply say it's a part of our normal process, and it's been ongoing and is key to the methodology by which the board addresses the risks that we face in delivering those results to shareholders. So I won't comment in terms of publicly our strategies and our efforts to assess and evaluate that until it would be appropriate.
Acting Chair, there are no further questions on this item.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the question. The results of the proxy voting for the re-election of Keith is now shown behind me on the screens. The proxy results indicate that this resolution will pass, and on behalf of the board, congratulate Keith on his re-election. I'll now hand it back over to Keith to meet the rest of the proceedings.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Look, I now turn to item 2B relating to the re-election of Dr. Vanessa Guthrie, AO. Vanessa was appointed to the board on the 1st of July 2017 and is a member of the Safety Sustainability Committee, the People and Remuneration and Culture Committee. In accordance with the Constitution, Vanessa retires and, being eligible, offers herself for election. The board, with Vanessa abstaining, recommends that shareholders vote in favour of Vanessa's re-election. Shareholders will have an opportunity to ask questions in relation to Vanessa's re-election at the end of this meeting, at this item of business. Sorry. I'll now turn to item 2C relating to the election of Mr. John Lydon. John's been nominated by the directors in accordance with the Constitution and, being eligible, offers himself for election. If he's elected, John will join the Safety and Sustainability Committee and the Nomination Committee. Biographical details for John are contained in the notice of meeting. The board recommends that shareholders vote in favour of John's election. Again, shareholders will have the opportunity to ask questions in relation to John's election at the end of this item of business. I now turn to item 2D relating to the election of Miss Vicky McFadden. Vicky's been nominated by directors in accordance with the Constitution and, being eligible, offers herself for election. If she's elected, Vicky will join the Audit and Risk Committee and the People and Remuneration and Culture Committee. Biographical details for Vicky are contained in the notice of meeting. The board recommends that shareholders vote in favour of Vicky's election. I'll now invite questions in relation to the re-election of Vanessa and the election of John and Vicky. James, do we have any registered questions for this item?
Chair, the first question is from Bryn O'Brien.
Thank you, Chair. My question was going to be put to Mr. Lydon. Will there be an opportunity to ask questions directly to Mr. Lydon, or we just ask to you?
Through me, yes.
Yeah, so when we did, ACCR did seek a meeting with Mr. Lydon and he declined our invitation, and so we would have liked to have put these questions directly to him in advance of this meeting in private. But I just wish to, as many of you, as you will be very well aware, ACCR is engaged in litigation against the company in relation to greenwashing, and you'll be very relieved, and my lawyers will be very relieved that I don't intend to ask a question that relates to that case in particular. But I did want to ask Mr. Lydon a question about greenwashing, which is relevant to our decision as to whether to vote for his election, and that question is this. Mr. Lydon is currently co-chair of what is known as the Climate Leaders Coalition, a club, if you will, of heavy emitters, many heavy emitters. And the point that I wanted to draw your attention to and Mr. Lydon's attention to is that 3 of those members, so as a requirement of membership, members are supposed to have a credible plan to address Scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, but 3 of those members are the 3 companies in Australia that are currently facing litigation in relation to greenwashing. So I wanted Mr. Lydon to address that point, to address the question of what does he consider greenwashing And why does he think that 3 of the members of the Climate Leaders Coalition are subject to litigation in relation to greenwashing?
I don't think that's not a relevant matter to Santos, but let me just talk a little bit about John and the recommendation around his appointment. And in terms of chairing those particular groups, I'm there because I think John was there because of his own personal resolve on this matter. He is someone who cares very passionately about the planet. That's one of the reasons that we've actually asked him to join the board. He is someone who will drive the board and push us very hard to do more and do more faster. That's, he thinks differently to many of us as well. He's going to challenge us. That's why we want him on the board. I think his representation on this industry organisation is because he feels that by working with industry he can help make a difference, and that's what John's all about. So I'm very strongly in favour of him joining the board because he's going to bring a different voice and different debate to our board, which is what we want.
Well, we look forward to a conversation with him. If that's
Thank you.
possible.
Thanks, Brent. Next question, James.
Chair, there are no further questions on this item.
Okay, well, thank you. As a result, the results of the proxy voting for each of the director re-elections and elections are now shown on the screens behind me. The results indicate that each of these resolutions pass, and I congratulate Vanessa on her re-election and John and Vicky on their elections. I now move to item 3, the remuneration report. This item of business asks shareholders to adopt the company's remuneration report. Firstly, I'd like to thank shareholders and other stakeholders for their feedback on our remuneration framework as part of an ongoing improvement in the transparency of the report and its readability. And it has improved, I think, a lot on previous years, and we continue to work on that. This year's report, we think, clearly demonstrates the alignment of total remuneration outcomes with the company's performance and shareholder value creation. The board's committed to a proactive approach to engage with shareholders in 2024 to continue to address remuneration queries in a transparent manner, and we have a robust framework. We want to make sure we have a robust framework. Despite a challenging external regulatory environment in 2023, we remained very steadfast in our approach to delivering on strategy, and we continued our commitment to our disciplined low-cost operating model. And I've talked previously about some of the highlights of the business for 23. Strong base business performance, delivering annual production of around just 91.7 million barrels of oil equivalent, annual revenues of $5.9 billion and underlying profit for the period of $1.4 billion. Free cash flow break even for the year, which is a really important number for Santos, was $28 a barrel unhedged. We had low unit production costs, excluding the bio-wind and late life production. Net debt of $4.3 billion and a gearing of 21.8% as at 31st of December 23, and that figure falls to 18.4% when you exclude leases. So overall, our business performance was strong. While annual production was just short of target, the portfolio delivered strong annual free cash flow from operations in what's been a very challenging year. In addition to this, in 23, we delivered industry-leading performance in environmental spills. That means less, while local Indigenous expenditure increased across all our regions. Santos equity Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions intensity performance for the year was in line with our Climate Transition Action Plan. These outcomes contributed to a scorecard result for our short-term incentive scorecard of 110.6% of target out of a possible 167%. The 2020 long-term incentive award was tested following the end of the 4-year period. The share price decreased 7% over that performance period, which correlates with no vesting for the relative TSR measures against both the ASX Total Shareholder Return comparator and the S&P Global 1200 Energy Index comparator groups. So overall, the vesting outcome for the long-term incentive was 47.1%. I'm pleased now to take questions that you may have in regard to the remuneration report. If you have questions relating to the MD's proposed grant of share acquisition rights, please hold those questions, and you can raise them when we discuss that during the next agenda item. James, do we have any questions for shareholders registered for this item?
Chair, the first question comes from Rachel Deans.
Thank you. The International Energy Agency has made it clear that meeting the Paris climate goals would see cuts to fossil fuel demands by more than 25% by 2030 and 80% in 2050, requiring no new long lead time upstream oil and gas projects to be developed. However, Santos's remuneration structure incentivises key management to increase oil and gas production and progress oil and gas growth projects. This is inconsistent with numerous peers, including Shell and Total Energies. Why has Santos chosen to structure its remuneration in this way?
I think we've chosen a path like that because it aligns with our strategy, which we've outlined during this meeting several times. Our plan is to to invest and sustain our production. So we're growing, sustaining production around existing assets. We're looking to decarbonise our business and develop new energy business. So our scorecard is a balanced scorecard that tries to look at our production and remuneration is the same. We look at our performance in the current environment, because if we don't perform today, remuneration, we need to perform today to have a licence to operate in the future and implement the strategy that we do. So you have to balance between the short term and the long term. So if I go to, for example, to our short-term incentive scorecard, there are things in there about operations. There are things in there about developing the projects we need that will generate the revenue that enable us to decarbonise and create these new businesses. But there are also measures in there about reducing our emissions and increasing our performance in the whole environmental sustainability and kind of governance space. If you look at our record over the last 4 or 5 years, you'll see continually in the short-term incentive scorecard, the weighting around those ESG measures has increased. Last year, it was at 40% of the scorecard. This year, it's going to be 42% of the scorecard. The year before that, it was 35%. We're ratcheting up those elements as well as they become increasingly important to our business. So we think our remuneration model and scorecard actually reflects our strategy. It reflects the current position of the company and the importance of actually performing the way we're performing today, because it enables that future that we're aiming for. Thank you.
I just have a follow-up, please. Chair, as you know, the CEO Growth Projects incentive in the remuneration report has been controversial. My understanding is that for the duration of the bonuses from 2022 to 2026, as the company passes certain operational milestones or fails to achieve them, parts of the growth incentives get locked in, or if the milestone is not achieved satisfactorily, parts of the bonuses get locked out. Please will you disclose to shareholders how much of the CEO's $6 million growth bonuses have already been locked in, and how exactly the board has assessed which milestones have not been reached? And will you commit to disclose the milestones in advance rather than retrospectively, so that shareholders understand what exactly is being incentivised by this bonus?
Okay, let's just start with a disclosure around the incentive scheme itself. When we announced the scheme, which was supported by almost 75% of shareholders at the time as part of the remuneration report, we made it quite clear that we would not disclose the specific details of the measures, because some of them are actually quite commercial in confidence. And as you can imagine, that others of them are targets that we have set that would actually stretch the CEO, and I'd be concerned. We need to be able to have an opportunity to be able to set targets that really stretch and demand, and not face the risk that we'll be charged with things like greenwashing. We want to stretch our organisation, but unfortunately some of the approaches that have been taken prevent us from making those sort of things public, because there's too much risk. So basically, we do disclose, though, in our annual report every year what's been achieved. We go through a process with the board. We've actually documented at the very beginning of this thing what are the expectations around performance. We come in every year and assess against that document performance against those measures. And I can tell you that not all those measures will be achieved. And that's all I can say.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, James?
Chair, the next question is from Bryn O'Brien.
Thank you, and this will be my final question. I appreciate you bearing with me today, and thanks to the other shareholders. So it follows on, I guess, from Ms Dean's question. It does seem that when the growth projects incentive was put in place, the company's strategy was a bit different. So again, revisiting the CEO's remarks today, growth was not one of the 4 things that he mentioned at the end of that. Hearing through you that peak capex is approaching, and some of those growth projects won't go ahead. It is not expected that all of them will go ahead. So my question is, if you were going to design a future REM structure when this expires, how would you design one so that it doesn't create perverse incentives to grow in uneconomic ways and to grow emissions? And how would you approach the conversation with your CEO or a potential future CEO around removing those emotional barriers to degrowth, removing those emotional barriers or financial barriers to pursuing a no-growth strategy, a lower emission strategy?
So just to be clear on the incentive, the board believes that's actually worked really well. We really asked Kevin to focus on this capital-intensive phase in the company. We were investing in Picker, we're investing in the Barossa project, which involves significant capital investment, and we felt, given Santos's performance back in the sort of the early 2012, that sort of period with GLNG and things like that, this was a priority item for our investors, that you knew that our CEO was really focused on good capital stewardship through these projects, and those projects are well delivered. We balanced that with also the fact that we were taking our first steps towards the energy transition. So a large component, 40% of that scorecard, is actually directed at setting us on down the path on energy transition activities as well. So it's not, maybe the name gives you the wrong perception, but if you're going to read the detail in the annual report, in the remuneration report, it's a balanced sort of approach that really addresses for us what were the 2 key challenges at the time: stewarding these capital projects through at a really intense time for the company, and delivering on some really important milestones to set us down the path towards our energy transition. And we're making kind of good progress on those. In terms of what happens when this thing finishes, I did mention in my introduction here that we will be consulting with stakeholders on this over the course of the year as we improve our report. And I'm not going to preempt what that might look like. Thank you. James?
Chair, the next question is from Claire Astle. Chair, it seems Claire may have left, so there are no
maybe the party pies
further
sort of
questions on this item.
Yeah. Thank you. No more questions then. All right, look on the screens behind me, you'll see displayed the proxy voting outcome for this item. I'll now move to the next item of business, item 4, which relates to the grant of share acquisition rights to Mr Kevin Gallagher. The item asks shareholders to approve a grant of share acquisition rights to the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, Mr Kevin Gallagher. The detailed explanation of this item is set out in the notice of meeting. The board is confident that the targets for the CEO's share acquisition rights are aligned with shareholders' interests. I'll now take questions on this item. James, do we have any questions from shareholders registered on this item?
Chair, there are no questions on this item.
Thanks, James. So on the screens behind me, you'll see displayed the proxy voting outcomes for this item. I'll now move on to the next item of business, item 5, which is the renewal of the proportional takeover provisions for a further 3 years. This item asks shareholders to approve the renewal of the proportional takeover provisions set out in Rule 70 of the company's constitution, which were last reviewed by shareholders and renewed at the 2021 annual general meeting for a period of 3 years. A detailed explanation of this item is set out in the notice of meeting. James, do we have any questions from shareholders registered for this item?
Chair, there are no questions on this item.
Thanks, James. So on the screens behind me, you will see displayed the proxy voting outcomes for this item as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that completes the formal items of business for the 2024 annual general meeting, and I now declare the meeting closed, subject to finalisation of the polls. Please note the polls will remain open for another 10 minutes, so please ensure you lodge your vote within that time. If you need any assistance with your voting, please raise your hand and a Computershare representative will come and assist you. Thank you for your time, for your questions and your continued engagement and support. The board and executive management team look forward to catching up in the foyer through the doors at the back of the room over light refreshments. Thank you.